Hey guys, Loman02. I wanted to explore a set of 3 games and kind of discuss 4-color blood in the 100-card Singleton meta. So the format is 100-card Singleton here. We're playing Blue-Red Moon. Player Dots tends to play 4-color blood, so I think this is probably a favored matchup for Blue-Red Moon, depending on when and where it's able to get after its moon effects, of which it has 3. It has Back to Basics, Blood Moon, and Magus of the Moon. As you can tell, we do have the Blood Moon in our hand. This is a fairly low disruption hand, but Jace Vryn's Prodigy can turn the hand into a lot. I've got 2 basic lands. I've got a Portent, which means this hand can turn into a significant, or can turn into something significantly different, and then Impulse, which is essentially the same thing. So our opponent leads off here on a Birds of Paradise. We're able to dig up a counterspell initially, and now we're just looking for land. See land, search for his Kanta, and an Irrelevant on top, which I like. I like well enough to keep here. My hope is my opponent doesn't play an extremely good 3-out on turn 3, but they do not. They just resolve an Aven Mind Sensor, and they beat in there for 2. They opt just to cycle their land off, which means their hand is probably quite landed. I end up getting Grim Lavamancer here, because I figure it's probably going to be the strongest, but at this point, I'm just going to go for a Blood Moon, because my opponent does not have Abrupt Decay up, and I can take him off of it. They cast a Thoughtseize here, end up taking the card that we found with Impulse to get rid of their Aven Mind Sensor, but they're essentially stuck on mana as long as their birds, with their birds being their only fixing. I go ahead and Burst Lightning, leaving up both Counterspell and Daze, and at some point in time, I'm pretty sure to find a way to kill them here. With them only doing 2 a turn, I've got a lot of time, plus a Jace Vryn's Prodigy, which will flip within 1 turn cycle and allow me to recast the Burst Lightning. Obviously, I'd have to assume some risk with it, because if they have a Bolt or something like that in hand, they could easily snipe off my Jace Vryn's Prodigy, and all I would have is Daze to cover it unless I hit another island. But I feel pretty advantaged from this position, and, we just get there. So one of the things I wanted to mention about 4-color blood is I think the deck's kind of undergone some genesis. Dots is playing, I would say, an older generation version of the deck before some changes in the metagame took place. And at this point in time, I think 4-color blood was actually, at the point in time at which the deck he's playing that's been changed slightly but not significantly, I think this was the best deck in the format. But I think the newer renditions of the deck that embrace a little more efficiency and tend to be more aggressive in nature, and are a little more curve-teched, tend to be a little stronger right now, because blue is actually in a very good spot. Now that we've given blue back a lot of its best draw cards, to include Dig Through Time, Treasure Cruise, I think blue is much more benefited in this meta, in this archetype, or against this archetype, because I think his variant of the deck that he's running right now is just a bit slower than the blue decks can be, and can't really get to a point where it's easy to outvalue them. There are certain cards that you certainly need to be afraid of. If that 3 had been like a Tireless Tracker, then it probably would have been a different game. Game 2, a Blue-Red Moon versus 4-color blood. This hand is not great, but it's keepable. A lot of basics in it, obviously. Draw to a Logic Knot, not half bad. Lead on Island, so we can leave up the Brainstorm in case my opponent tries to make us discard. I do have 1/2 of a combo, because this is a Pester Mike, Hiki Chiki, Splinter Twin deck. Opponent plays out Tarmogoyf, I say, okay. Go ahead and draw for the turn. I just play a Mountain out here, because there's no point in exposing the Sulphur Falls to a Wasteland, and I can't even cast the Logic Knot for any significant amount of mana this turn. So, we go ahead and toss the turn back to our opponent. And MTGO is going awfully slow right now, guys. Hopefully it speeds up. There we go. Opponent plays on a tapped land and does nothing. I don't think I would have just tossed the Snapcaster Mage in front of this thing. If they have instant speed removal, it's a pretty big disaster. I don't think they would attack with it anyways on 0, but if they did, I'd be like, okay, dude, I'm a little skeptical. It's a little sketchy. I'm going to continue to leave up the Logic Knot and the Brainstorm here, and if they want to try to do something, then I'll probably pretend I'm going to counter it like I am right now. What I'm trying to do, the sub-game is to get them to tap out on their turn so I can slam a Magus of the Moon. I go ahead and Brainstorm here, looking for an island, actually, because I want to make Shackles live. They force discards out of both of us. I go ahead and discard the Impulse here, because I think it's actually the least useful card in my hand. I actually kind of like my hand here. I think it's pretty decent. I cast on the Snapcaster for no value, because the Liliana needs to be dealt with. I drop an island this turn, go ahead and get the attack in, see if they're going to, Fatal Push or something like that. They do not, so Liliana takes 2. I go ahead and resolve my Magus here and lock out their mana with the exception of the one forest. They force discards. Again, I discard the mountain, quote-unquote, card in my hand, and the Tarmogoyf stays back. Draw an additional mountain, which we actually knew was on top, I believe, at this point. Cast out the Pestermite after forgetting that our Magus of the Moon hits our lands as well. And go ahead and get rid of the Liliana, and I believe force the concession. He discarded the Huntmaster, which I'm not a fan of because he knows Blood Moon's a card in my deck. And Master of the Wild Hunt actually could have been cast in this board state. It would have been extremely good right now, actually. Well, I mean, he doesn't know we have Vidalcan Shackles, but I think it would have been better to keep that as opposed to ditch it there. So as you can see, like, Blue-Red can tend to out-tempo this deck now. And we didn't even really, per se, get any of the power cards, the power delve cards that are now available in the format. So this next time, I want to play him kind of like with a deck that's similar to his own. It's a tempo-based deck. This is more of an aggro control deck than a mid-range deck. His deck is more mid-range. So we're playing with a Jeskai aggro control deck. And Moto is taking his sweet time to go through my draw phase here. Go ahead and find a Volcanic here because I know I'm going to want red at some point. I'm going to ice him here just to buy some time and get a little further into the deck. And I actually want to set up so I'm countering a 4-drop with the Spell Queller. And I figure if he led the way he led, I figure he has some untapped lands, and he probably didn't have a good 2 in his hand. So we're going to end up going for a Spell Queller here to just slow him down some. The Spell Queller will eventually likely die. It is a Garruk. Garruk's a big threat. So we get Spell Queller down, at least, stop this for a bit. I do lead on the Karakas here despite wanting to play the Celestial Colonnade because I figure the likelihood of my opponent having removal for this thing is pretty high. I'm going to let him remove it even though he gains life because I think it's more relevant to actually try to win this game on mana efficiency than it is on life total. I think mana efficiency will pay dividends comparative to life total. Playing that second to doing his first play was pretty embarrassing, though. I think that was a big player on his part. He goes ahead and Abrupt Decays our Mentor, but we got a free card out of it, and we got a removal card out of him. Leave up the Karakas here. Attack him with all. Opponent goes ahead, and I believe, Maelstrom Pulses our Angel and plays down a Sylvan Caryatid. So you can see like some of these cards that are value-based, like the tapped lands, the Sylvan Caryatid, are just kind of slow right now. This is possibly a misplay on my part. I don't know if I needed to Swords to Plowshares there. It's certainly very aggressive. But my thought was, eventually you can activate these man lands. I think it's going to get very big. I'd rather do that now than later. If I hit a land here, I'm going to be able to utilize my Celestial Colonnade. As it stands, I miss my land drop. Go ahead and bounce the Beast, and then just get in for... I have to stay back, because right now he could activate either the Lava Claw Reaches or the Hissing Quagmire, which would trade and or just block and kill any one of my threats. Opponent seizes the Monarchy here, plays down another 3/3. We bounce his Marchesa at his end step here, and find the island we need, and end up activating the Celestial Colonnade. Right now, we're kind of just trying to bide time to find red mana, and seizing the Monarchy here is great for us, because we're able to just dig a little deeper in the deck, and hopefully find that red mana. Opponent activates. I do go ahead and block out the Queen Marchesa here, because I would like to not give him death-touching 1/1s. I just have to activate again here, smash in, put him to 2, and opponent draws, realizes they cannot win from this position, and goes ahead and packs it in here. We have Mystical Tutor as well, which could have gotten something busted, but we're winning regardless. We have Lighting Helix in hand. Never found that secondary red source. If we had, Fiery Confluence probably would have made shorter work of the game. That's a card a lot of folks don't play in their decks yet. In 100 card, I don't know why, because I think Fiery Confluence is just a bomb. I've been extremely happy with the card, but I don't see it all that often. I see it in mono red sometimes. Hoping that we can mise something with the Pierce here. Unfortunately, we see a Dwarven Blast Miner, but get very lucky and are able to find a Tundra here, play out the Sulphur Falls, then just blow this thing up. Opponent casts down an Ooze and plays on a tapped land. I could burn off the Ooze now. I would rather take the damage, though, and have mana drain up for whatever he ends up playing here. Plays on an Eternal Witness, which is pretty good. It's going to get Blast Miner more than likely. Go ahead and counter it. Get a bunch of mana here. Go ahead and blow up his Ooze. Play out the Gideon Ally of Zendikar. Make ourselves a 2/2 and say go. Opponent, unfortunately, again has not a Maelstrom Pulse, but Vindicate. Get in there for 2. I actually let him play his card here as opposed to looking in the main phase, because if it's I feel like if it's a Planeswalker, I'm going to be able to negate it. And if it's a creature, I think I could probably race it from this position. I play out the Young Pyromancer after seeing my opponent's hand, which includes Greenstone Zenith, the Johnny Vengeant, and some other nonsense. Bob. It contains Dark Confidant and those 2 cards. So I feel very comfortable landing my Young Pyromancer there and getting some value off of the Spell Pierce. I figured my opponent would play around that because it's pretty. I feel like it was pretty obvious that that's what I had because I was kind of trying to lead that. Opponent goes for a Greenstone Zenith, I believe, for 2 here. I do go ahead and just negate this. I don't really mind if my opponent plays Bob because I'm trying to play a tempo game here. And I don't really mind. Like the extra damage they take off their Bob is going to be pretty significant here. And if I hit another land, I have a 4/4 flyer with Vigilance. And I also have a Venser here to bounce their next spell they cast. So I feel pretty good. I believe they hit a Fleece Mane there. Yeah. They cast out the Maelstrom Pulse here. I go ahead and just bounce my Vendilion Click back to hand with my own Venser, getting another 2/2 on the board. They cast out the Fleece Mane here, but have no attacks. I find Treasure Cruise, end up passing it. They draw, go down to 5, and then just concede the game right here. So that was the game. So I guess what I wanted to kind of show, and I'll show this last game that Dots and I played, is that 4-color Blood's in a weird spot. I feel like it has to embrace the ground, and what I mean by that is it needs to be very curve-tech, very curve-conscious. It needs to still be able to play, control against the most aggressive of decks, like on turns 1 and 2, but I think it needs to be able to transition rapidly into an aggressive game plan against the blue decks that are out there right now. Like my philosophy against like the Moon decks, like the Blue-Red Moon deck we were playing in the first game against Dots, is that the way you beat those cards is, you can Abrupt Decay them, you can Dromoka's Command them, you can Golgari Charm them, you can Reclamation Sage them, Kasali Primage. There's answers in the deck, but if you don't have one of those, or you don't have a Sorcery Speed version of it, and they land one of those hate cards, the game's probably over if your game plan is just to rely on them. So I feel like oftentimes the best way to deal with them is to just build your deck in a way that it's capable of being aggressive enough that if an opponent casts a card like that, it's essentially a time walk for you. So like, turn 1 Mana Dork, turn 2, Voice of Resurgence, turn 3 Doran, or, if it's a Mana Dork, maybe, Doran on turn 2 plus 4-drop on turn 3. And if you're on the play and they drop a Blood Moon on their turn 3, then they're still taking a horrific volume of damage, and essentially giving you a time walk. That's kind of how I like to treat that matchup. And that's why I built the deck. I've changed the deck significantly from like a more value-based Planeswalker deck. I had a lot more 4-drops and 5-drops, and just slammed it as low as I could to the ground and got rid of some of the 2-drop Mana Dorks. I really was not having a good time with Sylvan Caryatid. The card, I think the only place it really shone was against like red deck wins, but I mean against most other matchups that included blue, I just felt like it was kind of a wasted card. So the one place I do think the older style 4-color Blood has benefited is in the mid-range matchup, which we go with our 4-color Blood deck here, and this hand's great, so it looks great to me at least. We end up drawing well, play out a Bayou here if I'm not mistaken, drop the Land of War Elves, get Thoughtseized, nixing our Tidal Sculler, get a Braided, play out our Tarmogoyf on the following turn. Opponent has bad news for us though. They have a Knight of the Reliquary here and a Wasteland, which is pretty upsetting. That's pretty frustrating. We do get our 5 damage in here, and we Wasteland them as well. They go ahead and fetch, take 2, and blow up our Tarmogoyf with an Abrupt Decay, but they're down to 2 cards at this point. I have to play out the 4/4 here to try to force their hand into not attacking, because they are at 8, so there's consideration there that I could possibly have burn or have drawn into burn. They do know my hand at this point, though, after casting Thoughtseize, but they've drawn pretty well. They have a pretty solid draw and have a Gideon here, and we're pretty much just dead. I do go ahead and attack in to see what they're going to let me do here. They don't take the damage. They block with the 2/2. I block the 8/8, go down to 2 here, and opponent, I believe, just plays out another threat, and I'm like, well, I'm dead, regardless of what I draw. The hope had been is maybe they just fizzled and didn't have another draw, allowed us to attack, hit them, and then we drew into a 3-damage burn spell. But we unfortunately missed there and lose the first game. Second game. So this hand is keepable. It's not horrible. We're probably going to draw into another land by turn 4, so I kind of like leading on the Land of War Elves, hopefully not getting it burned off. Unfortunately, we do, so we can play into a turn 3 Doran and turn 4 Bloodbraid Elf. Opponent does have the Dwarven Blastminer, so we just burn it off. We could have vindicated it, but obviously, we get duress here, but obviously it's better probably just to gain the life, I think. They play out a bunch of Mana Dorks, but are down to 0 cards, so I'm feeling pretty good. I think it's actually better here just to disrupt their mana flow. Put them down to just 4 mana as opposed to a bazillion. Same idea here. I don't cast out the Bloodbraid. I actually Fatal Push their last land to lock them off any of their 4-mana Planeswalkers and off of Liliana. And play out the Doran. Opponent plays Lingering Souls, probably their draw for the turn. I believe I end up drawing into something, Siege Rhino here, which is great with Doran because it makes it a 5-power attacker with Trample and also swings the life totals. Slam with Doran, assume I'm going to get jumped, and I do. Opponent plays down an Elspeth, makes a soldier token. I'm going to be able to kill Elspeth here. So I play out my Bloodbraid, find a Renegade Rallier, which is not a good pull, but it's a creature. They double block the Bloodbraid, trade both their 1/1s for it, lose their Elspeth, are down to 1 card after draw step, and just go ahead and pack it in, because if I draw a land, I'm activating Raging Ravine. If I don't, I'm playing a Tidehollow Sculler if their card's irrelevant. They can put 2 more 1/1s into play with Lingering Souls, but Siege Rhino is going over the top of that. The best case, they can just double block the Renegade Rallier, but they probably need to chump and chump. Because 5 plus 5 is a lot of damage. It puts them down to 2, and any burn draw would be good at that point as well. So that was Game 2. Game 3 is probably actually the most interesting game. This draw is not great against my opponent. It's not really fast, so I think the way that my deck wins against this other mid-range deck is by just going getting an early threat down and then just disrupting them. They have a good value card in the form of Stoneforge. Luckily, I have the answer in hand. I do go ahead and Lightning Helix this card because I want to develop some food for my Scavenging Ooze. They play Tidehollow Sculler, take the Swords to Plowshares. I'm pretty sure my Ooze is going to get blown up here, but I go ahead and play it out regardless because it's the only thing I can do this turn. And we get Forked Bolted, and they play out a Fintorn Elves. I play out the Arid Mesa, I believe, find a Savannah, play out the Elspeth Knight Errant, put a 1/1 into play. Not feeling very good about this game at this point, though, but the one resource that I'm ahead of my opponent on is time at this point in time. So they go ahead and get 2 against my Elspeth. If they have a Bolt, they're going to get it. They do have Archtrail on top, which means my Elspeth is likely dead next turn. I also know they have a Sword of Feast and Famine in hand, which is a big game against me because it's going to mean that, one of my Elspeth dies here, but also it's going to start chopping my hand apart. I do draw into a Marchesa at a minimum, play out the tapped land because eventually I am going to want to attack with a Lifelinker, find Green Sun Zenith, which is likely to find Kasali Pridemage, so I did not bring in the Reclamation Sage for this game. I take the 6 damage here, lose the land out of my hand. I've drawn a lot of lands this game as well. I kept a more landed hand with 4, and I've kind of drawn a lot of them. I think I've drawn 3 or 4 at this point. I do get a black 1/1 Death Touch Assassin here, which is not bad. Go ahead and find a Kasali Pridemage, because the Kasali Pridemage can do a couple things, and actually I believe I surprised my opponent in this game with how I use it. So it can blow up either the Tidehollow Sculler, getting me back the Swords to Plowshares, or it can blow up the sword. Either of which is pretty decent. But the card advantage they're getting off their Courser right now is pretty massive. And additionally, having the Monarchy at this point from us is also a pretty big game. They play out the Anafenza, but I actually honestly wanted them to almost have it so I could get the Assassin every turn. The Assassin is actually a pretty big game as well. It does take away from their game plan significantly. Draw into a Grim Flayer here. So play the Flayer out, go ahead and fetch. Just to try to get lands out of my deck, and also to be able to activate the Shambling Vent. And because I know they probably don't have a Mind Sensor in hand, I don't want them to draw into it randomly and not be able to fetch on their turn. That's why I fetched on mine. Played Ajani out. No big surprise here. They kill the Queen Marchesa, but I have the Ajani locked down with the Fairy Rogue next turn. They draw the next card, so they have a Shriekmaw in hand now. Draw to an Abrupt Decay. I go ahead and make a pretty ballsy attack here with Grimflayer because I think I need to take risk at this point in order to get out of this bad situation. They try to Monstrous their Fleece Mane. I go ahead and Abrupt Decay the Fleece Mane because I'm not going to be able to get through that thing if I don't. They go ahead and block with their Anafenza. I blow up the Tidehollow Sculler. So this is kind of a trick play. I know I leave the sword in play, but right now I want to set up my own hand. So I make a pretty sizable error here. I forget that I'm going to have the Monarchy at this point and draw into this. I should have left Tarmogoyf on top. I don't think the Gideon makes that big a difference because Shriekmaw would be an issue against the Knight token. But what I wanted to do here, I think more than likely, was actually not have the sword hit me, so I had to discard the Gideon, discard the Tarmogoyf or a land, and then get the Gideon on the next turn, and then make a 2/2 to block the Courser of Krufix. I do activate the 2/3 to gain a little bit of incremental life. My opponent's down to 22 seconds at this point, though, and because I'm on, like, I've only spent 10 minutes this whole game, and they're down to 13 seconds, I force them to play it out. I do fetch here. They activate their man land, going for the attack here, and unfortunately, they run out of time. So we get them on time. Is it a dirtbag move? Yeah, you could say whatever, but it probably is. But when I'm on 15 minutes and my opponent's down to 1 second, I don't feel so bad. And unfortunately for them, they couldn't quite hit F6 fast enough or something, and they clock out here. I do think their version of the deck is benefited, or is not benefited, but is advantaged in this matchup due to how I've retuned my build of 4-color blood into a more aggressive style deck. So a lot less value, and then like cards like Doran the Siege Tower, stuff like that. What is it? The Vampire Aristocrat. So it's a lot more aggressive, can do a lot more damage kind of just out of nowhere, but it cannot grind the value that their deck can grind. And we kind of took a gambit in this game by casting out the Marchesa, but I think at that point we were just so out-tempoed that we had to try to get into at least one more card, and then also get into some threats that could actually block their threats and ideally kill them. The Greens on Zenith was certainly a strong draw in the mid-game, though, as it allowed us to essentially hold back their army and buy the time we needed to. And in some ways, it allowed us to utilize the one resource that we had an advantage on throughout this game, which was time to secure a victory. Which, call it what you will. If it's strategically a little bit skewed, it wouldn't happen in Paper Magic, sure, but it's Magic Online, and it is a thing that happens on here. So I hope you guys enjoyed this series of 3 games and kind of the study of 4-color blood as Genesis. I do think if the meta ever becomes more mid-range, 4-color blood is the best mid-range deck, but I do think it requires retuning to compete with the more combo-oriented decks that are running around now, with the hyper-aggressive white weenie decks, and with some of the big blue decks. I think you want to be able to get a sizable threat down that needs to be answered immediately, no later than turn 2. In this meta right now. And I think if you have a deck that's more value-oriented, you're going to have a tougher time doing that habitually. Obviously there's certain draws that this older deck, which is still very similar to the newer version that I'm playing here, can still do that, but I think oftentimes you're going to find that on turn 2, you're casting something that's doesn't per se hit as hard as some of the cards that I've replaced in the deck on this end. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video of this 100-card Singleton Expo of Blue Red Moon, Jeskai Tempo, and the Mirror of 4-color blood versus 4-color blood. If it's a format that interests you, it's played by a fairly small group of folks every Saturday competitively. It's a free tournament though, but there is prizing. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and take care now.